soybean, wheat, and sorghum farmers, do you like eating your product? I sure hope so, because remember when y'all were so happy that we were going to be America first and America only, and therefore we weren't going to be feeding all those people around the world because we were going to prioritize ourselves first? How do you feel now that so many American farmers are at risk for losing their farms because the U.S. government is no longer buying commodities from them in order to supply those food programs? And many of you didn't even know that the food grown right on your farm in the middle of nowhere was getting eaten by people in Africa and Asia because you sell to large grain elevators and commodity buyers. Not only did those programs make sure that fewer people in the world from not enough food, but they also stabilized prices by buying up surplus crops and created consistent demand that wasn't subject to the whims of global trade. See, when you produce too much of a crop or demand falls internationally or domestically for that crop, it's great to have an agency that comes in and buys up everything that you don't want to help people not starve. And in turn, you're not going to starve.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel where we'll break down the stories the mainstream headlines blows over. Now, if you're new here, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss our deep dive into politics, power, and the people caught in between. Now, here's the kicker. Trump's latest round of USAID budget cuts, right, meant to keep America's money in America, is ironically hitting America farmers the hardest. Yep, the same farmers who helped put Trump back in the White House are now facing the financial blowback of his so-called America First agenda.
Purchased surplus grains from American farmers and sent them overseas to feed hungry communities from Africa and Asia to South America and Ukraine. The program is called Food for Peace, and in 2022 it provided 4 billion pounds of food to 58 million people. But tonight, all that is in jeopardy after the Trump administration's decision to freeze funding for USAID. Hundreds of millions of dollars and millions of tons of wheat, lentils, and rice are stuck in ports and warehouses across America and around the globe. We're joined now by Kansas farmers Vance and Luis Emke. Their farm produces grain that ultimately makes it overseas. Thank you both so much for your time. Vance, let's start with you. Your wheat farm has been in the family since the 1880s. How does it make you feel to know your grain has gone to help people who so desperately needed it overseas?
Well, we do have a humanitarian and moral obligation to help, get food to these food deficient areas. It's also really good for developing goodwill with the United States.
And in Louise, Kansas Senator Jerry Moran says that stuck shipments have resumed. But taking a step back, if this program ultimately goes away, what impact will it have on your farm?
Well, the USAID annually buys about $2 billion worth of surplus ag commodities like wheat and grain sorghum that Louise and I grow right here on our farm. And that does help support net farm income. And by the way, we are having a real crisis out here in terms of income. Kent State University ag economists say cost of producing wheat is $2 a bushel higher than what the market is currently giving us. So, any market like through USAID is definitely appreciated.
Yeah, Louise, how would you say that the Food for Aid program has benefited you?
Well, it's been, there's only so many Kansans, and we cannot clearly eat all the wheat that we produce or the grain sorghum. And so we rely on customers, whether that's USAID or other countries through USAID. We need customers to buy our product, or we're SOL. I mean, we don't have a market, and it's critical, absolutely critical.
Well, anyway, this these grain commodities are going to a lot of these food deficient areas like sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, Latin and South America, Ukraine, and are helping to build goodwill over there. And so that's a real strong plus for the program. But in addition, the USAID funds a lot of research at land-grant universities like K-State, and right now $50 million worth of research at K-State is in jeopardy because of the problem right now with USAID.
We need that funding for research for not just their varieties, whatever research, like we've been in a drought. we need drought-resistant varieties. Farmers can't afford to do their own research. I mean, we don't have the plots, neither do they have the expertise.
And Vance, I know that you're a Republican in a community where 85% of voters cast their ballots for President Trump. You have said that you did not vote for him. How is the move to dismantle USAID being received in your community?
Well, everybody looks at it from a very practical point of view that, there's a very valuable market that has vanished, and that's going to have a consequence on the Kansas City and Chicago Board of Trade.
Luis and Vance Emke, we thank you so much for your insight and sharing your time.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
The USDA has decided to end an $11 billion program they had with Iowa farmers that was started about 3 years ago during the pandemic. And this particular program was for Iowa farmers to grow food for food pantries and school food programs. These programs help farmers develop more efficiencies with their farming techniques, but it also helped them move more product. Now, farmers say they knew that the program would end at some point, just not right now, considering they were already prepared for the next 3 years that were remaining in this current program. This end to this USDA program is going to end programs like local food for schools and subsidies where certain organizations would give like $1,000 to local schools to buy fresh organic food. In the meantime, they're asking people to support these local Iowa farmers because now they've got to move this product. A big problem.
You guys aren't going to believe this shit. I'll make it fast, but stay to the end for the kicker. You remember the last few years when you could not find a single family home, and if you could, you probably couldn't afford it because you had corporate interests like Zillow and BlackRock. They were coming in, heavily investing in the real estate market, wiping the single family homes off the market so the average person could not even buy one. Fast forward to this week, I'm sure you've seen the story of the Missouri farmer, the young guy who was at risk of losing his farm because the grant that he was going to receive to reimburse him for all these expenses he had been cut. Well, look, they've also cut USAID, which gave farmers millions and millions of dollars because they would buy their crops and then send them overseas or send them, places here in the United States to help people in need, but it also helped the farmers. Well, I found out today that there is a website called Acre Trader. Acre Trader is a company that heavily invests in agricultural land. So you can go invest in these farms that are failing, that somehow they're just starting to fail, and you can just buy them up. Well, guess who heavily funded Acre Trader? JD fucking Vance. Do you think they're out here just destroying these small farms so they can buy them up, all these tech bros? Kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Through this without crying. My name is Louise, and me and my family own a wheat farm in Kansas. We are all certainly lifelong Republicans, and we were so happy to vote for Trump in all 3 of his elections. However, we were certainly not aware that he was going to put a funding freeze on all USAID. 100% of our wheat produce is bought by USAID and shipped out of the country. So our farm is completely bankrupt. We have no customer. We had this whole deal with the US government, and now that is just gone in a second. And we are completely decimated. USAID buys about $2 billion worth of American farmers' goods annually, and every single one of those farms is in the same boat as us now. It's a sinking boat. He didn't consider us at all when he made these decisions, and it would be impossible for any world leader to do something that could negatively affect us more.
Last night, I watched video after video of farmers who might lose their farms because the government is reneging on contracts they wrote with these farmers. Hi, guys. My name's Will, your favorite rural campaign and elections expert, and let's talk about it. Now, the problem is President Trump's order to freeze most federal grants and loans has created a panic and uncertainty within the agricultural sector, which relies on billions of dollars in direct government assistance for loans, disaster relief, and conservation practices, many of which have been around since the days of FDR, and farmers have begun to rely on them. Now, if you've watched the news at all, you know that a federal judge blocked the order on Tuesday. The problem is, and what the media isn't telling you, is that farmers and ranchers over the last week to 10 days have begun to receive letters telling them that the government may not be able to live up to the promises they made in these signed contracts with farmers and ranchers to improve conservation and increase productivity on the farm. Sadly, I watched one cattle farmer video last night in the state of Missouri where he said that he's going to fall $80,000 short in funding because the government promised him that if he and his family invested in good conservation practices, they would support his efforts with grants and loans. He received a letter in the past 10 days telling him that they couldn't keep their promise even though they have a signed contract. And as a direct result, he's going to fall $80,000 short on his spring loan payment. And the only option he has right now is to sell his cattle. And he needs those cattle because those cattle are going to have calves, and he needs those calves to pay his fall payment. It's a no-win situation, and it's not his fault. My friends, this is the problem with electing a president that knows nothing about agriculture and placing people at the Department of Agriculture whose only understanding of growing crops and raising livestock is what they learned in a YouTube video on the plane on their way to Washington, D.C. To give you an example of the size of the problem, farmers received more than $10.5 billion in direct government payments in 2024, nearly half of which came from conservation programs. And that figure doesn't include federal crop insurance, which accounted for over $19 billion just in 2022 alone. And the consequences not only impact a farmer's ability to pay his loans, they also run the risk of costing farmers the land itself. As an example, the federal government approved a $2.3 million low-interest federal loan to replace drainage tiles in Montgomery County, Illinois. The loan was part of a $307 million USDA grant program to modernize rural drinking water and wastewater infrastructure. And for those of you that didn't grow up on a farm, drainage tiles or pipes buried under farmland carry away excess water. Farmers began using them in the 1890s, and many of these tiles in Montgomery County, Illinois are collapsing, and that causes flooding. And flooding prevents farmers from planting their crops. Now, farmers are starting to understand the extent of Trump's lack of knowledge, and they're starting to speak out. One farmer was quoted as saying, Trump has no knowledge, zero knowledge of what's important relating to agriculture, especially agricultural drainage. Unless you think that the grant programs spelled out in the freeze are the only way the Trump administration is attacking small family farms and ranches, remember this. This is just one piece of the puzzle. Before attempting to freeze federal grants and loans, Trump signed an executive order suspending all Inflation Reduction Act funding, including the USDA's partnership for climate, smart commodities, and a program aimed at supporting sustainable farming practices. The Inflation Reduction Act is a cornerstone of former President Joe Biden's climate policy, and it allocated $400 billion in funding and tax credits to spur conservation and green energy efforts. And many people don't know that billions of those dollars went into agriculture. Now, I know it's easy for Americans who are not involved in agriculture to simply say, well, that's who they voted for, or FAFO. But I'm simply asking everyone to remember that 30% of farmers and ranchers did not vote for Donald Trump. And the consequences of our inability to raise the amount of food that we need to grow to feed our country, and to grow the amount of livestock that we need to grow to feed our country and the world, will be felt mostly by poor people, the elderly, and children, more than anybody else. Now, I made a decision yesterday that from now on, when I do these videos, I'm going to end them with a call to action to tell people what they can do to make a difference. And here's your call for action. I'm asking everyone who watches this video and cares about food prices and the small family farm and ranch to call your elected officials, whether they're a Democrat or Republican, and tell them that the federal government needs to keep its word to small family farms and ranches. They need to provide the money that they promised they would provide for conservation efforts, improve farming, and increase productivity on the family farm. Farmers were counting on this when they signed the paper and spent the money that they spent. And don't let your politicians tell you that farmers aren't in danger. These letters have already gone out, and farmers have already been notified that they may not receive the funds that they were promised. And any politician that tells you otherwise is either sorely misinformed or they're lying to you. And I'm going to ask you to do one other thing. Please follow me here on TikTok and on YouTube. On YouTube, we go under the name Westmoreland Pops. And join the Back 40, because we're fighting every day to improve life in rural America and to stand up against politicians who claim to support rural Americans but vote every day against their best interests. If we combine our voices and we work together, we can make a positive difference and bring about critical change. Thanks, everybody. My name's Will. That's the news from the Back 40, and I hope you have a great day.
So here's what's happening. The Trump administration recently slashed funding to the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID. The idea, at least on paper, was to stop wasting taxpayers' money on foreign aid programs and redirect it towards domestic priorities. Sounds patriotic, right? Keep the money home, invest in America first. Except that's not what's happening. You see, USAID or USAID doesn't just hand out free money to developing countries. It funds agricultural development programs that buy American crops for food assistance projects abroad. Now, wheat, soybeans, corns, a lot of that comes straight from US farmers or US farms. When USAID buys less, American farmers sell less. And when they sell less, well, you can guess the rest. Now, these cuts are already sending shockwaves across rural America. For decades, food aid programs supported by USAID have been a lifeline for US farmers, especially during low price years when global demand dips, right? Those programs kept silos from overflowing and small family farms from closing. But now, with USAID budgets slashed by billions, export contracts are drying up. Farmers are watching their crops sit unsold. And the same administration that promised to make rural America great again is the one pulling the rug out from under them. Now, some farm associations have already started sounding the alarm. They say the cuts will lead to fewer overseas buyers, lower commodity prices, and you guessed it, more bankruptcies in farm country. It's deja vu all over again. Now, let's not forget, many of these struggling farmers are die-hard Trump supporters. They backed his trade wars. They trusted his tariffs. They believed the global elites were the reason their profits were shrinking, right? Now, with this USAID cuts, they are discovering that the global market wasn't the enemy. It was actually the biggest customer, right? Foreign aid programs that purchased American grain were part of what kept the heartland alive. Now, so when Trump says he's cutting foreign aid to America, or to foreign aid to help Americans, maybe someone should remind him that farmers are Americans too, right? Economists are warning that these cuts could have long-term consequences beyond the farm belt. Fewer exports means weaker trade relationships. Weaker trade means influence abroad, less influence abroad, right? And as the US pulls back, other countries like China, Russia are stepping in to fill the gap. Now, that's not just bad for farmers, that's bad for American global leadership. So here we are again, another America First policy that somehow ends up hurting Americans first. Now, the administration calls it fiscal responsibility, but for the farmers watching their livelihoods crumble, it feels more like betrayal. What do you think? Should the US continue funding food aid programs abroad if it benefits American farmers at home? Do you think Trump's America First agenda is really helping rural America, or just using it for political theater? And how much longer can these farmers hold on before the support base that built Trump's movement starts to crumble? Let's talk about it in the comment section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more grounded, fact-based political analysis Until next time, take care of yourself and keep asking the tough questions. Credit belongs to original creators. And thank you guys. Please subscribe.